Alrighty then. Yes, sir. Alright, so we're here, we're back. As you can see, the environment is a little different, but the vibe remains the same. I want to welcome you guys to Everyday Lessons Now. And Dr. Amala, yours truly, Jaiga, we are here. And if you find the settings looking different, it's only because we are on the road, which is one of the things we were looking forward to doing when the book dropped. I know the book is out.
Yes, indeed.
In full force, the book is out.
People are reading, we're getting feedback,
which we love and adore. People reading, the feedback is coming back. So we're here, and we had such a beautiful day today. We met with the ambassadors of Guyana, St. Lucia, and of course Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
And so many things we spoke about today. I learned a lot. I didn't know about bauxite. It's bauxite, right?
Yes,
I heard bauxite, and I think boxy one site, which is something totally different. Because in Trinidad, culture is boxy on site, but I didn't know bauxite and boxy on site is two different things.
Completely.
So we're here. By now, this should be episode 6.
It is.
So I want to thank you guys again for being on this journey with us thus far. We continue to come every week on Monday and try and enlighten you guys on a journey that we started and talk about things that affect everybody on a day-to-day basis. That's why, hence, Everyday Lessons.
Right.
All right. So
I think one of the things that was really interesting for me today was when we spoke a little bit about how work used to be, like in the 60s, and going back to I'm going to use the same bauxite example, and this was in Guyana. So in the 60s, Guyana was a little more segregated than it is now, probably not as segregated as the US would have been in those days. However, they were British people, and then they were Guyanese. And what we learned today was the British were the managers of the plants, and then people who came in from overseas, or Guyanese who had come back and had education, had come in sort of like a managerial position or in stewardship of understanding the roles and then being able to sort of bridge the gap between the white managers and the locals who were working in the plants. I find that interesting because while it's a little bit different from how work is now, it gives us an opportunity to look at how we got to where we are. And for me, being able to talk about work from a perspective of one, having people who control, who don't know anything about the culture that they're working in. That's very telling, because for them, they just come in and they're given a job to do.
Right.
So it's really not a case of understanding everything, but listen, we need to get 10,000 tons of this out by the end of the month, and that's it. And we really don't care how it's done. And then you have a situation where maybe it's not getting done, people have issues, whether it's living conditions, whether it's machinery not working or whatever. And then all they need to do is listen, but we're going to have to get some more people in to get this done. And that may not be the issue at all. So being able to, today for me, listening to that and just realizing that there were gaps at the time. And now, while there aren't as many gaps, not in the Caribbean anyway, while there aren't as many gaps, you can see how work has transitioned from being sort of, at the time, just descendant of the plantation mentality, really, and I say plantation, and everybody is familiar with days of slavery and so on, whether it was sugar or rice or whatever, because, the different crops ran through the Caribbean. But that, I thought, was an interesting story today, how the world of work has changed in terms of what the face of work looks like.
The face of work has changed, but I think the mentality that he spoke about still festers a little bit around it in terms of hierarchies to the lower in terms of...
We still have hierarchies, but they look a little different.
No, the hierarchies look a little different, but I'm talking about with respect to one thing. They do the same thing a little differently now, I believe. Mm-hmm. Like, for instance, the owner of a company always, or the management, drive different vehicles. to everybody.
Right.
It's like it's like a different type of segregation.
Right.
It's like, yo, you cannot as a let's use a bank for example. A teller in the bank should not drive the same car as a bank manager. But now that is changing a little bit. You find the tellers start to move it because they are fighting for some sort of acceptance and want to feel a sense of superiority. You understand? You find that, and when you read books like The Art of War, it teaches you don't make those mistakes in the workplace. Try and make, this might sound cliches, but try and keep master happy as best as you can in order for you to sail through and not end up in any kind of confusion or backlash. Because the worst thing you could do for yourself, especially in the Caribbean, is pull up and work with a car that is way more expensive than your boss. Then questions are raised. Nobody ever asks how, meaning in a West Indian culture, a young man at 25 most times still living home. So the possibility of him being able to afford a nice car per se might be a little easier now than when my dad was 25. Because when my dad was 25, he had no home to stay in. Remember, the culture a long time was as you reach of 18, 19, you need to find your way. Now, parenting changing so much in so many ways is that it's now not shunned upon anymore. It's welcome because of safety. A lot of younger parents, they feel as though they want to still hold on to their children. And you find now it's common practice to see a 40-year-old unmarried person living home. When that was shunned upon back in the days. You can't, especially for a woman, the pressure used to be plenty on ladies. A 40-year-old girl who's unmarried living home, it's like something wrong with you. It's man in one tail. Or
goat bite you, as we say in Guyana.
Wisdom?
Goat bite you.
What that mean, you sour? What does goat bite you mean, you sour? I never heard of what? Well, I know real people goat bite. I know real people goat bite. Same as goat bite here. It has some goat need to get shot because it have that same. If it's the same goat been going around biting people, that goat.
Old goat.
That goat old because I know. But no, on a real though. So today was really interesting when we spoke. Like I learned about a lot about that whole bauxite vibe and that's the understanding of how work segregation was. And for me, it really listening to what he spoke about, and we talking about this was the Guyanese ambassador. He went in heavily on that because he experienced it firsthand. But to me, I think it's still happening. It's just not as blatant. Like you're not gonna go in a kitchen space or a cafeteria space in a workplace now and feel segregation. You might feel it in groups, like there are group segregation in businesses, like people who work in, let's use a big company, like let's say for instance, like a electrical company. The guys who drive the truck won't sit with the girls who work in the office. Or the ones in higher management. You know how that goes, or executive or the board. So you find that like the fellows who working on contract who literally going out there and climbing light pole, they normally eat at the side of the road amongst themselves. So the segregation is still there because it's planted in their brain that they're not of, and half of the time, not half of the time, sometimes a young man might have graduated university and just take the job to climb ladder as a stepping stone. But in that little pocket there, that 6 months or to 2 years that he's working in that space, he might be academically wise, way smarter than his superior, but would not,
the opportunity may not have been there.
Wouldn't be there. So again, and this is when we talk about emotional intelligence, it's about understanding that too, because if you don't in a work environment, which we're seeing now, how easy it is for you to spiral down. Is like a next situation that happened heavily in the pandemic is loss of jobs. It's very hard for somebody who has given their life to a company, 25 years you work there, and what happened and what everybody ignored. To me, everybody ignored it. At least I can speak for Trinidad. Companies laid off people, but not all. So now you have just caused a rift in a long-term working relationship and a friendship. You know, it is you work with the same person for 25 years. You all do the same exact thing. You got sent home and they didn't. You might want to show empathy to the fact that I'm sorry you got sent home, but you also within your space is like, thank God it's
It
not
wasn't
me.
me.
And then
Yeah.
the person on the next end don't know how to process that,
Right.
because they could then look at it like they feel they want more sympathy from you.
Mm-hmm.
You're not showing enough. It's like in some cases, I've seen in some cases, some friends even say, "Well, you leave too.
Right.
They're sending us
Yeah.
home. Why you ain't come and go?"
Exactly.
I thought you was
Let's
my
make
friend.
it equal.
I'm like, but at the end of the day, I have my family to see about.
Right.
You're asking me to give up a job
Right.
because so this
In
is where
solidarity.
in solidarity, but in solidarity to what though?
Right.
This is something too that's been happening. People don't understand. For the past 2 years, so many things have changed, and that is something that a lot of people didn't talk about. And I have seen it mash up a lot of good friendships. I know people have been friends for 30 years, and in one pandemic, bam, because of a job,
Friendship is gone.
friendship is done because we all know this is where we think professional help needs to kind of intervene. How do you sit down with your best friend to
Right.
say,
Right.
Gail, what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. No,
I'm
it's
working.
tough.
You
It's
then start to look at the reality facing you in your face. I can't pay mortgage this month.
right.
Children have to go to school. And you on the other end with your full job, but you still have your everyday life to
Right,
live. You
right.
still have your everyday bill. You want to help. The most you might be able to do is offer them something in the immediate, but not on a long-term basis.
Right. Right.
And over time, that weighs on a friendship.
Of course it does. Yeah.
So when we spoke today about the jobs and the different segregations and the things that we went through and how it's changed, I think that the change is there, but we have plenty of learning to do still.
I think too. The face, like I said, the face of work has changed. However, in some cases, well, some of those jobs may not necessarily be there anymore. So that
True.
strict sort of factory setting, the strict production of
A lot of those
those
are gone.
many of those are gone. However, one of the things that he said too that I thought was interesting is if you're producing a specific amount of a product in one place, just because the world market in terms of consumption has gotten larger, if you're producing 10 tons now that 10 tons may be able to, it's work for a small community, it's work for, let's say 100 people work in this factory. But because someone else is able to produce 300 tons in a much bigger space, you'll think of shutting down that one.
Correct.
And I like when he said you have to look at not just the fact that your production is not up, but how many people you could affect in terms of, whether you can scale it or not. And that is something that people perhaps need to consider as well in terms of the laying off and that sort of thing.
Yeah, but
know?
now you're reaching into a space of you started to talk to upstairs.
Absolutely.
And upstairs,
They make
only
decisions
concern
differently.
is the bottom.
Yes.
And that bottom as in
Line.
the bottom line.
Right.
Upstairs is going to say, listen, we found a company that could give us 300 tons
Right.
in 2 months
Half the
earlier than
time.
half the time that you can give it to me.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
I understand.
That's how that goes.
I understand that the 10,000 tons that you all make pay 150 salaries and you all turn a profit, but shutting this down and just putting all my energy where I can get 300
Is way more
is way
beneficial.
better. And I don't have to pay these extra 150 people.
Right.
I'm getting 3 times the amount that I need with less the staff. So why keep you?
Right.
And this is where I believe that great conversations, people feel as though because you don't understand the economics or the, as we say, the big part or the big section of something, you don't need to be, it doesn't need to be explained to you. Some people, and that's like how our parents used to get on a long time. See how to big people business, which I understand, but also they never like to elaborate on stuff because they feel it is above you. And people still operate in that space now, and companies do that. It's like you're just a laborer, or you're the truck driver of, let's say, company A. Company A is looking to turn down and send home 1,500 people. Why? We're not explaining that to you.
Right.
We are doing that because we are looking at the $15-16 billion profit we make every year. And I think that disconnect is one of the things we need to look at moving forward. They need to find a way, and that's where middle management is very important. You need to find a way
Right. And
to
as
tell.
Ambassador Hines was saying, I remember at one point, someone had asked him when he was in Canada to stay to be a bridge between the floor staff and
Correct.
management because he understood both levels. And I think people should really aspire to that sort of middle management role, one, or being able to understand all the facets of what you do.
I honestly believe in that.
Yes, so that you can explain something to someone who works on a level that is lower than yours, then you know it at your level, and then you can also explain it to someone who's higher than you are. And for managers as well, understanding every single part of that chain that you're responsible for. So if something happens, you're able to speak directly to one, whoever needs to repair it or replace it or whatever. You don't now need to outsource to get that information and then pass it on. And it makes you look a lot more competent if you have knowledge of everything that you're in control of.
And numbers don't lie. You see it in the numbers. People who have, like, let's use a restaurant here, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who's owned a chain of restaurants. Mm-hmm. The most successful restaurants are people who came up in food and beverage.
Right.
They worked in service, like they did hotel school,
right.
or they were sous chef at some point, but just had the knack. Some people had, they just have the knack for business. So they saw opportunity, they took it, and maybe they stepped away from the kitchen to focus more on building a brand,
right.
but hiring the right chef, hiring the right waiters, because they understand what it takes. And people like that always win. So when you see, I find it's to me, it's always a disrespect if you have a manager or supervisor trying to tell you how to do something they can't do. I could never understand that. It's like you own a barber shop. You're telling your barbers, okay, I need you guys in here this and that, but you can't cut her hair. To me, this is my humble opinion. I just feel as though if you're in something, it's like even this, I will tell you or something private. Before we started the podcast, one of the reasons I was reluctant is because I felt as though I was not as knowledgeable as Dr. Amala, and I felt as though I would be doing the podcast and the viewers an injustice. So I took up my time and went to study, and got certified in emotional and social intelligence after doing hours and hours and hours of classes. So I can feel a little better. So at least in a conversation, I could then say, oh no, and I can make a reference about something pertaining to the topic.
Right.
As opposed to people who like to talk about politics and don't even know who is their minister. You ever go in like arguments, people in about, yeah, boy, and the thing this. What's the prime minister name? The prime minister. That kind of ignorance is what we're trying to move away from.
Yeah.
And it happens in the workplace. You see it all the time, especially because of, but this is a whole next episode. We can't get into that. And one of the issues too in the Caribbean, I think why we're there is because of favoritism. Nepotism is a huge issue in the Caribbean. Not much kids get big jobs because the father,
somebody's
or the uncle, or granddad, or grandmother, as the case may be, and that kind of energy needs to change, because without that change, you will continue doing what it is we're doing, and you will continue having the same segregation, just not as blatant as it used to be. Long time it was just a black and white thing. Now it's a classist thing. It's an ethnicity thing. Different factors inside of the whole so it's segregation. That's, as you said, a different face. You understand?
Yeah.
So again, look how fast the 20 minutes is finished, guys.
Yep.
real fast. So we hope you all learn something again today, as we try to do all the time, and think about it when you go out to work. Smile at your coworker.
Yeah, and understand what they do.
Understand what they do.
So
it's always cool to ask, listen, because it happens plenty in those dispatch kind of businesses where you dispatch somebody to go out, and let's say you're working at a place like a Verizon, where you have workers who need to go to a building and install a new modem, and the customer is complaining, but you don't have a great understanding of how these buildings are, because different states have different style. So a building in Brooklyn might need more work than a building in Queens, because it's older in years, and it might take the drywall that might be easily cut somewhere else will be hard in an older building. So if you don't understand these things, you taking the call now, and then you might be writing up on this person's report and giving them a bad report that they was late on calls and they take too long, not understanding different buildings require different type of work. And those little things could help.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, closing words.
Closing words. I think that we are at a point where, we want to start talking about things that happen at work. And today was one of those good examples to highlight some of the things that happened then, some of the things that are still happening now, and look at how we're able to bridge those gaps and what are the things we can do using emotional intelligence to sort of narrow those gaps and help people to feel better in the situations that they find themselves in at work. So find out what your coworker is doing. And, if you are in a senior or supervisory position, ensure that you know what everybody who works in your chain is doing. So,
have an idea.
You have, yeah.
We're not telling you to go
and do their job.
Yeah, we just telling you have an idea. So you have a better understanding so you can show and employ some empathy for a bad day. Like a day when there's a flood and you know that the guys might have problems getting into a tunnel to do something on that particular day. But having a little better understanding of what they have to go through to get the job done. Because at the end of the day, if companies work in unison, there's one goal. It's to make the customers happy and to, again, for the higher ups to make sure that their bottom line is intact.
Yep.
All right. So guys, thank you so much for this week's episode. And as we do every week in Fine Style, we leave you dancing. Take a little one before we go. Be on.